Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much again for joining me here. Hope you're having a great day. We got a super important update here regarding some of these top coins, as well as the back-end data here with crypto regulation, and of course, taking a look at Fear and Greed Index, Altcoin Season Index, and the net ETF inflows. We had a lot of inflow here recently, so we're going to talk about that. If you're new to the channel, welcome aboard. CryptoCash.tech is the site. Link down below if you want to become a better trader. To start off with the obvious here, just to kind of give you some perspective, the rules were approved after a group of no votes flipped to yes. So basically what this means here is that with crypto markets, the way that it is, with the House setting a vote and getting that approved, that should be positive for the market, but it's also very strange how the market responds too, because we're overinflated going into this. This could be a buy the rumor, sell the news situation. So just some friendly advice, be very careful trading right now. A lot of long positions open. If you do have them, make sure that you consider adjusting your stop loss higher, just in case we get some kind of crazy weird sell-off. Let's start off, of course, here as well, outside of that news, with a market overview and just kind of give you some perspective on what these things mean for altcoins. Because yes, alt season is starting, but that needs to be taken with a grain of salt, because I'm a firm believer since ETF approval that alt season is not really going to be a thing like it was before. It'll pale in comparison. It'll still be strong with a lot of stronger coins, specifically ones we cover, but for the most part, I don't think we're going to see anything monumental. However, there's a lot of good coins here doing much better than Bitcoin, outperforming, and these are ones that we look at and trade in our community. Dogwoof Hat, for example, SEI, SUI, Ethereum, Solana now back on track. A lot of good stuff here going on there. So let's talk about this. First of all, when it comes to Fear and Greed Index, this is an important thing to recognize. Generally speaking, when the Fear and Greed Index gets to 70 plus, on average, the Bitcoin price goes sideways for some time and inevitably trickles off. Or we see the Fear and Greed Index pull back similar to our size, and then we start to see that ramp up again, that calming. But this is going to be a longer calm before the storm. I think seeing 150, which is a potential fib level here of retracement, continuation higher for Bitcoin, is lower in the immediate future. I think relative near future, sure. Later down the road, perhaps 2025, yeah, that seems practical. But right now, not so much. I think we're looking more so like a November, December run, which is quite common, good push for altcoins in most cases during that time frame. Other than that, altcoin season index, just to clarify, we're at a 38 yesterday, 36 here today. As long as we stay over 30 for the most part, this just kind of tells us the strength in altcoins versus Bitcoin. As long as we stay in that 30 plus range, we can expect a lot of good continuation higher. So I'm not proposing we're going to see a dump from altcoins. They're doing very well. Altcoin season is definitely in effect, but we got to recognize here that Bitcoin dominance coming down here. This is an easy reflection of what's happening in the market. So we do have 3 black crows. I think we're going to start seeing some stabilization this weekend with some profits being taken on altcoins. So I'm slowly positioning myself into some short positions, specifically with cup and handle patterns like we're seeing here, where we're retesting potentially here our local high of 340. It's less likely to see that kind of thing happen moving forward. So this is an XRP chart. We'll look at that here in a minute. Stick around here for that, of course. What we want to start with is Ethereum, and the back-end data just kind of go in order here for us, okay? So starting with the Ethereum chart, first of all, 20 billion liquidation long delta. You don't want to short against this coin. Super strong, not a ton of open interest here locally. It's all down in the $3,000 range. So what that means for us is we could and should pull back, but it's just too high of a risk to consider a short position with this coin. Too much volume. 20 billion is like the highest we've seen since March of 24, when we saw our high of 4,000 for the first time in that year for us here with Ethereum. All that being said, 3,500 to 3,600 is a heavy concentration of liquidation. And we jump into the charts here for Ethereum. We want to recognize that, a pullback here, this is very this is a very positive approximation here. In other words, this is optimistic. If we see the $3,000 to $3,100 range, that would be an optimal place to consider entry. That is essentially the 0.65 golden pocket range for the local retracement from our high of 4,100 to our low of 1,400. That is insane. Look at how much of a correction is that? That is like 65% correction. That's ridiculous. So I averaged in 1,500 to 2,000 pretty heavy myself, so I'm really content with my Ethereum spot bag. And I did recommend at that time, of course, you did so yourself, because once more, Ethereum in the sub $2,000 range is a pretty good buy, even as much hate as the coin got. Anyways, let's take a quick look here at the daily time frame. We're over all moving averages. Our local high here is about 2,900. That's where we topped out for the first time before we took off and haven't looked back yet. So best case scenario, 2,900 to 3,100 is that area in which you should consider dollar cost averaging, especially if we pull back like this. We'll still be respecting our ascending trend at that point, right? So that's a good sign. So overall, the macro for Ethereum is really good. If we get lucky and the price pulls back, that's great. I would consider dollar cost averaging on the way down. Moving on to Solana. Is a little rock star here, so to speak, in its own way, obviously based on its local charts, but from a macro perspective, we still got a lot of room for improvement. However, if we take a look at the back-end data here for Solana, we can recognize that, 168, 180, those are the two heavier concentrations here locally. Obviously, 155 is that massive area. I think we were looking for a long in the 150 to 155 range. We kissed 157 and just took off. So this is a total missed opportunity. But once more, that's what happens when you kind of wait for confirmation. Unfortunately, we've missed a lot of opportunities in that way, but the market is filled with missed opportunities, so don't beat yourself up over it. I'm trying to normalize that so you understand it's very common. The key takeaway is we're making some shifts in our community here to take longs and or shorts depending on the market at key level resistances and or support ranges instead of just waiting for the perfect opportunity. Because honestly, perfection is not really a thing in crypto, right? It's difficult. What you can perfect is your own risk tolerance, and that's a conversation for another day. Anyways, liquidation long delta is at about 2 billion for Solana. And we're right here with our open interest range at 167. If you see here, the most amount of interest is that previous high, likely to work as a new low. So hypothetically, we see 167. That's a logical consideration for a long, right? That's kind of what we're looking for. That puts us right here in our upper range of our support and our golden pocket fit level. So that's why that's highlighted on the chart here. 165 to 168 is that range of consideration for DCA on the way down for a likely pivot there, not just because it's the local high, but it's the more recent high. And once more, we have a lot of confluence there. And that's what you want to trade is confluence. You don't just trade a 0.786 fib level because some Elliott wave idiot tells you that that's where you should do it. They're always going to be right because they provide you with multiple potential areas, right? Once more, for the most part, nothing's perfect, but that's a good consideration for an area there because there's a lot of things confirming there. The 200-day SMA is hanging out right there too. So from a macro scenario here, like most altcoins, we're looking pretty strong here for Solana to consider a long position at a slightly lower price point. There's also a fair value gap there too. Cool. All right, so that's what we're going to be looking for our community here. I'm actually going to set an alert at 167 just so I kind of get the idea of what's going on at that point when that happens. All right, moving on to SUI. Let's take a quick look here and just kind of recognize a few things. Actually, before we do that, I want you to note that there's a phenomenal trading opportunity here with Bitcoin. Please use the link below to register with my links so you can get nice reward bonuses every single month. We have new promotionals every single month. And for right now, we got a $10,000 prize pool that continues to scale up as volume increases. Awesome stuff. Be sure to check them out. All right, so let's get back to SUI. I want to kind of touch this on. It's important to recognize we have a lot of support at 360 and the likelihood or propensity for the price to pull back is higher. I'll explain more so on the smaller timeframes why I mean that. But for the most part, SUI is starting to lose momentum at this range. And we're starting to see a likelihood of further correction down. Now, keep in mind, from a liquidation perspective, there is a ton of shorts between 415 and 440. So we may very well see a quick spike up before the price pulls back. But liquidation long delta is starting to taper off. And this is one of those things that's important to recognize. If it stays too high for too long, it starts to dissipate because the bulls have not been able to break that threshold of $4, essentially, 4 to 410. All that being said, if we look here at, let's go ahead and look at open interest. We can recognize here that there is a chunk of open interest at 410 and $4 even. There's a heaviest amount of area there. So what that basically means is exit liquidity is going to be coming out in those ranges. We have more resistance there, and it's more likely to work as a kind of a compression type of zone here, right? So there's a chance we could consolidate here and leg up again, but I think we're more likely to pull back to fill our fair value gap here between 360 and 380, or at the very least retest 380. If I'm not mistaken, our take profit target for our short on SUI is at 381, because as a community here, we do like to, see here, take a look. BNB, oh yeah, we took some Dogecoin profits yesterday for a long. What I'm getting at is as a community, we do like to kind of emphasize F SUI. It's a total joke. If you're a SUI fanboy, don't take offense to that. But on the same accord, we like to short this coin just because the whales tend to pump it whenever the short's opened. It's a kind of a funny thing. Anyways, you'd know that if you're in our community. Feel free to join us. Our Discord is actually quite a lot of fun. Okay. Last but not least here on SUI, just want to recognize the 4-hour time frame and just kind of clarify this here. We have a type of, I think I need to update this pattern here, of course, because it is starting to kind of compress, but we do have an ascending type of broadening wedge pattern. And once more, folks, don't trade patterns solely on their own because it's just a bad idea. But if you take it with confluence and other confirming factors, then you're more likely to find success, right? So just because some idiot online says that we've got a cup and handle, for example, in XRP, that's not why we're trading it. There's a lot of other reasons for that, okay? This being said, we can see that this is a ascending broadening wedge pattern. These typically break to the downside. Bitcoin had a descending broadening wedge when we were at 74,000. We ran to 110, okay? That's kind of the inverse essentially. So not saying we're going to run down, but the likelihood of pullback is higher, especially if Bitcoin corrects itself to the 115K range, the CME gap, the fair value gap for Bitcoin. Okay, cool. So that's kind of where we're at for SUI. Let's jump on over to XRP and just kind of get some perspective here on why I feel this coin may pull back as well. So first of all, let's take a look at the back-end liquidation data. And this isn't going to be like monumentally like, okay, we see an obvious divergence, we're going to pull back because of this. Because we look at liquidation, while majority of liquidation has been fully swept, there's still a lot of late shorts at between 330 and 340 with liquidation and or stop losses there, right? Our stop loss isn't that close because we use low leverage. But once more, a lot of high leverage traders have that. That's why liquidation exists. And then we take a look here though at liquidation long delta. It is at about 1.2, 1.3 billion, which is not a heck of a lot for this coin, but it is definitely something to note, okay? So there's more longs than shorts in the market. So generally speaking, shorting this coin is potentially hazardous based on the simple fact that, well, liquidation, long delta tells us we have more people taking longs in the coin, right? And that's more likely to push the price higher. But if we look at open interest, we see heavy accumulation between $3 and $2.95. So the likelihood of retesting that level is higher based on the simple fact that that's a large open interest area. It works kind of like a magnet in a lot of ways. So what I mean by that here is if we take a look at the charts and we recognize the daily time frame, there's a lot of support in that area. So heaven forbid the price were to come down to that $3 or 280 range, you can expect a bounce there. But the reason why I feel specifically more so why XRP will pull back isn't just because it's overextended, because it certainly is. We hit a 9 on TD sequential at 285 4 days ago. So we're now 13 days approximately into this continuation to the uptrend or to the upside. Now, obviously, overextension doesn't mean a ton in trading, but when you overextend yourself into a key level resistance, specifically the local high and or all-time high, the odds of breaking through an all-time high in the first attempt is super low, okay? It's generally common for the price to pull back. That's why cup and handle patterns exist. This hasn't even come to fruition yet, just so you know, but it is an indication that a pullback would make sense because it's super, super common for all-time highs, most recent highs, to be retested first and for the price to pull back before it legs up because we need a lot of volume to punch through that. Now, keep in mind, there is a lot of volume here. So I'm not proposing we're just going to turn right around. We may consolidate from this range for a little while before we pull back. But with Bitcoin being overextended, a lot of profits on the board for Bitcoin this week and altcoins included, it just seems to make sense we're going to have one day of reckoning at the very least, where a lot of alts are going to pull back to local highs. To me, that would make sense to see the $3 to 280 range as a likely probability, okay? So those are my thoughts. What are yours? Why don't you comment below? If you're an XRP fanboy or a SUI fanboy, I apologize in advance or after the fact if I slandered your favorite coin. But if you took offense to anything you see here, you probably shouldn't be watching because I'm just going to tell you how things are. It's legitimately just how trading should be. I'm not a moon boy by any stretch. I'm just going to legitimately say, hey, these are the facts and this is where it's at. I don't really have any incentive to try to pump anything up because you know, it's not really my style. Anyways, you'll know that if you've been watching me for 4 or 5 years now, but I can tell you this has been an awesome experience. You are the reason why I do this. So thank you so much for being an amazing part of my life. You can say thank you or you're welcome by hitting the like button, commenting below, joining us on Twitter, Telegram, and Discord. I have playout charts, shorts, and obviously some important stuff you need to stay abreast on. But I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thanks again so much. We'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself out there. Bye-bye.